Okay, it is 7:31. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our presentation this night on parenting tweens, how to handle things when sass is high and logic is low with Martha Tyler. We're so grateful that you could join us this evening. First, we want to thank Lakeview Pediatrics for sponsoring this talk. We know how fortunate we are to have a partnership with them. They are a group of pediatricians that we've known for a number of years now that really treat the whole child and family as they walk in their door. And I'll share with you, and this is evidence just recently, that their patients continue to come see them, whether they're moving 30, 40 miles away or even out of state. So thank you so much to Lakeview Pediatrics for sponsoring this opportunity. Formative Psychological Services is a private practice of clinicians that works with kids through adults, couples, and families. We provide neuropsych assessments, mostly school-based neuropsychological assessments for kids, and as well as school consultation. And tonight, I'm really privileged to present to you our presenter, Martha Tyler, who has her master's in education, has experience for a number of years as a nanny, and now has her associates in marriage and family therapy, and is a licensed professional counselor. And when she had her master's in that, and I know I'm going off script already, and I apologize, Martha, if you want to see her bio, you can find that on our website, fpschicago.com. But I just love, when she had her master's in education, she was an English teacher. And when you think about this combination of skills that she brings to the table of really being an expert in language, in creativity and expression and storytelling, and that combined with her real life experience as a nanny and caring for kids and their families, and with her clinical knowledge of family systems and kids' mental health needs, I think we're in really good hands this evening to learn about parenting tweens. So Martha, take it away. And actually, I'm going to interrupt before you grab that baton. This presentation is going to go until 8:30. We'll stick around for a few minutes after that for questions. The Q&A tab should be likely at the bottom of your screen. You can enter some questions there. I'll be monitoring that as we go. If there's a good breaking point, I'll interject and have Martha address some of those questions. So thanks again for being here, and Martha, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Frampton. That was a wonderful introduction. And I am so pleased to be here with you all tonight and to be talking about tweens, because as I was thinking about this presentation, I realized there are not out there as many resources as I would like about parenting tweens and this particular age that's not really childhood anymore. I mean, they are children for sure, but we're not in that early childhood and we're not in adolescence yet. And it's this kind of weird time in children's lives and parents' lives. So I appreciate you taking time on a Wednesday night to come learn about this. It's really meaningful, and I hope that it is helpful for you. So we are going to get started talking about the brain. And I have Miss Frizzle on there because she is an icon of mine. And I think that she's just wonderful for talking about the brain. So big things are happening in the brain for tweens. So if you see this image here, which will be on all of these slides, it talks about how our development goes from the back to the front, generally speaking. And so we're going to start with the cerebellum, which is back towards the back. You can see it here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but so the cerebellum is where physical coordination happens. That's that physical coordination. It gets developed pretty early. And by this point, by the tween age, it's pretty developed. It also works on sensory processing. So that is really good to know, because if you have a child who is struggling with sensory processing, you will have already seen the signs, but in this age, it might jump out at you even more so. It's really important for this age and all ages to have a lot of opportunities for movement. A lot of movement needs to happen for all children, but tweens in particular, to really solidify that physical coordination and to get that sensory processing input that they need to be able to do things like focus in school and regulate their emotions. So this is the first place I would suggest checking in if a tween is struggling. Really checking in on how much do they get to move in a day. I know a lot of our school systems have cut back on recess and opportunities to move in the day at times. And so sometimes we have to supplement that outside of school. So if your tween is struggling, I would check in with how much they can move throughout the day and the different ways that they can move. So are they able to climb? Are they able to like stomp and like destroy if they want, destroy in like a safe way, obviously, things like that. So the cerebellum, first place to check in is just how much movement are they getting in a day. Next, let's talk about the amygdala. This is where those emotional reactions happen. The fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response happens in our amygdala. And sometimes people get curious about that fawn response, about what that means. The reason that I love to include that is because I have seen so many caregivers who, when you are having a talk, a guidance talk, or trying to correct behavior, and the child in your care comes back with like, I love your shirt, when they're in trouble, that is a fawn response. And a lot of times people read that as manipulation, and it's actually a bid for connection. So if that is happening and your reaction is like, why are you saying that right now? Like, thanks for loving my shirt, but like, that's not what we're talking about. You're trying to distract me, all of that sort of thing. I encourage you to think of that as, do you still love me? I'm in trouble. Do you still love me? As with all of the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, but fawn in particular is relatively new to that list. And so I like to spend a little bit of time talking about that, because I too have been thrown off when a child is like, I love your eyes are so pretty, or, you know, your jewelry is nice, or whatever it is. Or can I go get you something, or anything like that. So it's not manipulative. It is a bid for connection, which you're going to hear me say a lot tonight. A lot of the behaviors, unwanted behaviors that we see, are actually bids for connection. So this is also where impulses are. And this is where a lot of decision-making happens for tweens, because, like I said, our brains develop back to front. So when we talk about the prefrontal cortex, we'll talk more about that. But this is more developed for tweens than their prefrontal cortex at this point. Next up, we have the nucleus accumbens. So this is motivation. This is our reward center. This chases that like feeling good, right? Like that, that desire to like feel good. So eating sweet things, or moving like really fast, or like sometimes dangerous situations of like trying to balance or trying to do a new task, things like that, chasing that like dopamine, that feeling good. And this area in particular undergoes a huge makeover during early adolescence. So a lot of pruning is happening where the synapses and neural pathways are getting pruned off as they're not being used. And then a lot are growing during this time. And then the prefrontal cortex. So this is our last part of our brain to develop. It is not developed until our mid-20s. So that is hard, right? Because we talked about our amygdala and our nucleus accumbens, like those parts are all about chasing that feeling good. And then also those really big emotions live there. And our prefrontal cortex is our logic center. That is where our future planning happens. That is where we consider consequences. That is the part of our brain that says like, oh, maybe we shouldn't do that. That is actually kind of dangerous. And so when this is the last part of our brain to develop, a lot of times we're seeing those big emotions and we're like, why are you upset about this? Why are you mad about this? And it's because the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. And so they don't have the same access to logic that we do as adults. And so, yeah, that considering the consequences and future planning also happens there. And it also is where we regulate our emotions. And so I imagine that if you are attending this, you have heard Dan Siegel's and Tina Payne Bryson, upstairs brain and downstairs brain. So Dr. Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson talk about the prefrontal cortex as being your upstairs brain, where the logic happens, the empathy happens, future planning, regulating all of the emotions. And your downstairs brain is the amygdala. And so sometimes what happens is that connection gets like cut off for children and for all of us really. And so he talks about it as flipping your lid. So we have to calm down that prefrontal cortex before we can talk about logic at all with our tweens and with all children. If they are not emotionally regulated, they're not going to be able to hear the really wonderful ideas that you have of how they could do it differently. Before I move on from the brain, I would love to check in. John, were there any questions?
No, we are rolling. None that you need to answer.
Wonderful. Awesome. All right. So we are now going to talk about sleep for tweens. So melatonin starts being released later at night, which is aggravating because you're like, you need so much sleep. They need between 9 to 13 hours of sleep. And yet they're not tired when they used to be tired. I know we all just experienced daylight savings time, and that can really throw things for a loop. So a tween's natural rhythm, their like average rhythm, is sleeping from 1 a.m. to 10 a.m. So if you just let them create their own schedule based on how their bodies are feeling, that would be their rhythm. So we're fighting against, like, the way our school is set up and culture is set up. We are pretty much fighting against that natural rhythm, which is hard, right? Like, they're tired and grouchy and you're tired and grouchy, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But it is what it is, right? We have to go to school. So I'm sharing this to hopefully foster a little bit of empathy for these tweens who do really probably want to go to bed. They probably want to be getting more sleep. Maybe they would never admit that, but we know that they could use more sleep, and their sleep schedule is just off. It's just off. and it's sad. So screens can have a really big impact on sleep schedule. And so I'm sure you all have heard in lots of places that like turning off all screens, like cutting off all screens at least an hour, if not two, before bedtime is really important. And it's really important for tweens to have a wind down period. And I, because I was an English teacher, am always recommending that they read books, like physical books, instead of being on a screen. But I also know that that can be its own very special battle. So yeah, tweens need between 9 to 13 hours of sleep, which is a lot, right? And I know for me, I find myself needing more sleep on average than lots of people. So people can fall in the range of there, and tweens can fall in the range of there. If you are going up, or if you're going into their room to wake them up in the morning and you're having to try several times to wake them up, that is a sign that they might not be getting enough sleep. And so that is a really good indicator of, okay, we need to adjust. We need to have a longer wind down period, or move bedtime to earlier, or start doing a relaxation at night. Progressive muscle relaxation, Spotify has a ton of them. I find them really helpful. When I am working with kids in my former life as a nanny, those progressive muscle relaxation, or just a body scan, those are really helpful for guiding tweens through how to like shut down their body, how to become relaxed, how to get into that sleepy state, because it's not super intuitive. Your brain often at night starts thinking of all the things that you did not accomplish that day, or the things that are coming up tomorrow. And it can be really hard to shut your brain down. So I would suggest, if falling asleep is a struggle for your tween, look up a progressive muscle relaxation or a guided meditation and play it. And you can be in the room too. It's really nice to, it's a really nice way to connect before bedtime for you both to lay in bed and just relax your bodies together. And then it's also, sleep is particularly needed for children who menstruate in early puberty. So if they are menstruating before teenage years, then they will need even more sleep than children who do not menstruate. So that is something to keep in mind when you are thinking about sleep schedule. And I'm going to check in again. Any questions?
Not at this time.
Awesome. All right. Well, now we get to watch a little bit of Inside Out. So just to share why I'm using this clip, the creator of Inside Out had an 11-year-old daughter when he was working on this film. And so the Riley, the protagonist of this movie, is 11 years old, because that was what he was going through at this time. So I'm going to play a little scene and you can just check in if this sounds familiar from your home.
How was the first day of school?
She's probing us.
I'm done. You pretend to be Joy.
What? Okay.
It was fine, I guess. I don't know. Oh, very smooth. That was just like Joy.
Something is definitely going on.
She's never acted like this before. What should we do? We're gonna find out what's happening, but we'll need support. Signal the husband. Ahem.
With a nice pass over to Reed, comes across that right.
Uh-oh. She's looking at us. What did she say?
What? Oh, sorry, sir. No one was listening.
Is it garbage night? We left the toilet seat up. What? What is it, woman? What?
He's making that stupid face again.
I could strangle him right now.
Signal him again.
Ah, so
Riley, how was school?
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
For this, we gave up that Brazilian helicopter pilot?
Boo, I'll be joy.
School was great, all right?
Riley, is everything okay?
Sir, she just rolled her eyes at us.
What is her deal? All right, make a show of force. I don't want to have to put the foot down.
No, not the foot.
Riley, I do not like this new attitude.
Oh, I'll show you attitude.
No. Stay happy.
What is your problem? Just leave me alone.
Sir, reporting high levels of sass.
Take it to DEFCON 2.
You heard that, gentlemen? DEFCON 2.
Listen, young lady, I don't know where this disrespectful attitude came from.
You want a piece of this, Pops? Come and get it!
Yeah, well,
Here it comes. Prepare the foot.
Keys to safety position. Ready to launch on your command, sir.
just shut up!
Fire! That's it. Go to your room. Now.
The foot is down. The foot is down.
Good job, gentlemen. That could have been a disaster.
Well, that was a disaster.
Awesome. So the reason that I shared that is because it's actually a almost perfect representation of what I was talking about before with the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. So in that scene, Riley's prefrontal cortex goes offline and she is completely in her amygdala at that point. And you see that, you see anger like literally knocks everyone else out of the way to take control of the emotions board, which is a representation. This is obviously not what is actually happening in our brain, but it's a really good representation of how those emotions get heightened. And until we can calm down that prefrontal cortex through connection, we're not going to be able to talk logically with our tweens. So what can we do? Like, if that does feel really familiar, what can we do? So two major things are fostering autonomy and fostering connection. So autonomy is really important for this age. They want to go out and adventure more, that their brains are looking to go further out into the world and then come home to safety. So when we are fostering autonomy, we want to give our tweens more responsibility. And I know that if you did a poll of 100 random tweens and you were like, do you want more responsibility? They would probably say no. But it is really important, and it helps to like assign chores or to provide more things that a tween is doing around the house to help the community that is your family. That also fosters connection and fosters autonomy. It's a beautiful 2-for-1. So providing them with more responsibility, adding on some chores, showing them how to do the laundry, how to pack their own lunch, how to get to school. Like, one thing that I really love doing is if I am driving with kids is I actually ask them, like, where are we going? And if it's a route that we take often, I ask them if they can get us there. And if we have time and they say the wrong direction, I go in that direction just to see what happens. And when they realize it, and allowing them to kind of start figuring out like, oh, how do I get to school every day? So offering some of that autonomy, offering some of that responsibility. And also more freedom, fewer check-ins, fewer play dates where you need to be present, letting them run into a store by themselves and you wait in the car, things like that. Offer them chances to experience that autonomy and to experience going out into the world and seeing what it's like, testing their skills, developing their skills. That really feels great for a tween, to have a little bit more freedom and that you trust them with that freedom. So for tweens, we have to be the prefrontal cortex. I recently saw a research study that I did not have time to include in here because I literally saw it like last night, but it was talking about how co-regulation. So for infants from 0 to 2, that co-regulation piece is about 90%. They can self-soothe and self-regulate maybe 10% of the time. And then throughout childhood, it decreases, but not as much as you would think. We get into like 80%. And then for tweens, it's about 70% of the time we need to be helping co-regulate with them. So that is breathing, that is the connections that we're going to talk about, that is teaching them the coping skills of how to calm down, because it is not something that they are born with. And it is a skill like any other that we have to practice to get better at. So we have to be their prefrontal cortex. We have to be their logic and their empathy and their future planning for them at this age. A really wonderful way to help foster autonomy with your tween is to allow them to be the expert. So if they are super into Minecraft, or they are super into Babysitter's Club, or whatever it is, allowing them to teach you about it is super rewarding, because one, you'll understand a little bit better when they are talking about it, because a lot of times their fascinations, they talk about a lot. So asking questions about it, allowing them to be the expert can be really helpful, because it's also another 2-for-1. You're fostering autonomy, but you're also fostering that connection piece by wanting to learn about things that are important to them, even if they feel really silly to you. It's important to them, and so it's worth learning about. One of my favorite family suggestions when I work with families is to have a PowerPoint night. So everyone in the family makes a PowerPoint literally about whatever they want, and you all present on it. And it can be really silly. It can be very serious if you want. And some of the PowerPoints that clients have come in and talked about have been just hilarious. The things that every member of the family thinks of that they want to talk about and it can be a 15-minute PowerPoint. You don't need to have like 4 hours where you're sitting listening, but each person doing a 15-minute PowerPoint on something that they're super interested in can really, really help foster autonomy, and then also foster that connection piece, and teach you about something that your tween is really interested in, which again is important. Include them in problem solving. So if you are struggling to get out of the door in the morning before school, like you just really feel like that is a pain point in your day, going to the tween, like inviting them in and saying like, hey, I have noticed we are struggling to get out of the door on time. My goodness. I'm really curious about what ideas you have to help that, because I know I don't like feeling stressed right before I say goodbye to you for the day. And I imagine you don't like feeling stressed. And so including them in on that problem solving of saying like, what do you think we could do about it? Because a lot of times they'll come up with really wonderful ideas. They'll be like, oh, well, I could just have all my stuff out in the the night before. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. And because they helped problem solve, they are much more likely to continue doing it. And to buy in. You have kind of automatic buy-in if they come up with it. And then the next point on here is kind of building off of that. So if you are noticing something like they are struggling with their homework, or we'll just go with that example. So if they're struggling with their homework and you say, wow, I've really noticed that like homework has been hard for you lately. Like it seems like you are it takes you longer to complete it. And I see how frustrated you look when you're trying to do it. What's up with that? And really get curious about like what exactly is the problem? Like, is it that the reading feels hard? Is it that the math, like you don't understand one of the concepts? Is it that your teacher maybe talks so fast that you're struggling to keep up? Like, get really in the weeds with where the problem is occurring for them, because that is going to help you and them be able to problem solve around it. But that power of like, I've noticed, plus what's up with that, and then being really quiet. Sometimes I count in my head to 20 in those moments because I struggle to not come up with my own ideas. So I like sometimes literally sit on my hands and count to 20. So allowing that silence, because I guarantee you that the first time you ask this, their response will be, I don't know. And they'll just stare at you. So a good thing to say back to them is, yeah, this isn't something that we've really talked about a lot. And we certainly haven't been able to talk about it in a calm way in the past. And I'm really trying to change that. So we can take as long as you need. But I really am very curious about this. And I want to better understand what is feeling hard. So offering that, again, that encouragement and autonomy over being heard, being seen and being heard, can really, really do wonders. And then fostering connection. So in positive discipline, we talk about connection before correction. This means that if, let's say your tween decides they want to make brownies and they spill all the brownie mix all over the floor. And your reaction is like, oh my God, now I got to clean up all the brownie mix. And this is such a huge mess. And sometimes that is like our outward exclamation, right? Like we're like, oh, why did you do that? Or things like that. I have been there. I am not a perfect caregiver by any stretch of the imagination. And I have said that, things like that before. So we want to take a pause and look for a way that we can connect in that moment. So if it's brownie mix all over the floor, saying, oh, wow, that stinks. That brownie mix spilled everywhere. Like, oh, that is so annoying. Let's work together and clean this up, because it feels bad when you make a mistake. It feels really, really bad. So offering that connection before the correction is so vital in fostering this connection and creating a space where your tween feels safe to make mistakes and to come to you with mistakes they've made, because you really want to be laying that foundation in the tween years for those teenage years, because we all make mistakes. But teenagers especially make a lot of sometimes really big mistakes because their prefrontal cortex isn't done either. And so having this connection before correction invites your child to come to you with the mistakes, because they know that they are going to have your support before you try to like discipline or things like that. So really quick, I want to do an exercise with you all. So if you are driving or doing something where this is not safe, do not participate, obviously. But if you are in a place where you can do this, I invite you to try it. So with your non-dominant hand, for me, that's my left hand, I want you to make a fist, really, really, really tight fist. And with your dominant hand, for me, that's my right hand, I want you to try to pry that fist open. So this hand's job is to stay closed, and this hand's job is to try to open it. So everyone go, try to open it. And like really give it a go. Try to get it open. Can't do it, right? And like when I check in with my body after that, I feel frustrated. Like I feel like my cheeks are rosier. Like I worked hard to try to get that hand open and it would not open. Now I invite you to do the same thing with your non-dominant hand. So make a fist. And then with your dominant hand, and make sure you're squeezing that fist tight. With your dominant hand, I want you to cradle that fist. See how that feels in your body. Because for me, it feels hard to keep my hand in a fist when I have this other hand supporting it. And that is a lot of what we're doing with children too, is when we try to force them, when we try to get them to do something, we get into those power struggles. And when we provide that support, sometimes the hand will open on its own. So that connection piece before the correction, super important. We also need to talk about Gottman's magic ratio. So the Gottman Institute studies couples in particular, but this magic ratio applies to all kinds of relationships, all kinds of close relationships. So the idea is that for every one negative interaction, you need to have 5 positive interactions, which is a lot, right? But that is what the research shows, is that having 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction is how we build a trusting and loving relationship with our kids and with our partners too. So if you are finding that you are having negative, and there's not a whole lot of room for the positive in there, I encourage you to look for more ways that you can offer that connection, that you can be the prefrontal cortex, that you can provide the empathy and the safe, supportive space, because that will help that ratio shift for you. Curiosity questions, super important. So I'm curious, this is a little bit like the power of observation. And then what's up with that of like, hey, like I've noticed that I've noticed that your coat isn't getting hung up. Like what I'm curious about what's going on there. Like, what do you think is going on there? So just approaching things with curiosity instead of already having what you think the correct answer is in place, providing that opportunity for curiosity. This was with a slightly younger child, but I will say it worked really well. And I think you could change it to work with a tween too. So one time I was trying to help a child get dressed for the day, and they were 6 at the time, and they did not want to change out of their pajamas. They did not want to get in their clothes. And I said, and they were singing a song. They were singing a song that they had learned at school instead of getting dressed. And I said, I wonder if your voice sounds different when you're wearing your shorts. And they were like, oh, and then they put on their shorts and they sang again and they were like, it doesn't sound any different. And I was like, I wonder what it would sound like with your shirt on. And my goodness, it worked. And I don't know that that would work every time, but that day it worked. And sometimes that is all we need, just for it to work in that one moment. So curiosity questions are a great extra tool in your toolkit. Reflective listening, super important, especially as we help them build their emotional intelligence. So when your tween comes to you and says, nobody played with me today, reflecting back, wow, I imagine that felt really lonely. Nobody played with you and you felt lonely, or you felt really sad. And if you get it wrong, they will tell you, and it is okay. If they would rather say that they felt devastated than sad, then use their language. But yes, offering that, reflecting back what you are seeing, especially the emotions that you are seeing, can be really, really helpful, and it helps them build their vocabulary. When they do come and share something with you, especially something hard like nobody played with me today, after you've reflected, saying thank you for sharing that with me can really be helpful to encourage them to share in the future. And sometimes that thank you for sharing that with me also buys you a little bit of time, because I don't know about you all, but especially if a kid comes to me with somebody that was mean to them, I feel really angry in those moments. And so sometimes saying like, thank you for sharing that with me and reflecting the feeling I'm seeing in them buys me time so that I can respond to what they're saying instead of reacting. Again, genuine interest in their areas of interest. We've covered that. And then the lighthouse model of caregiving. So this idea of, instead of being a helicopter parent, being a lighthouse. So you are in the bay that is safe and you guide them towards you if they need you, but they can go sail out on the ocean. And then also just showing respect. If you are speaking to your children in a disrespectful way, that is the way that they are going to speak back to you. And if you really listen to how we talk to children, a lot of times we do talk to them in really disrespectful ways. Without like really recognizing it, right? I also am looking at the time, so I want to make sure that we're moving along, but I'm curious, John, are there any questions?
No, just a compliment or a comment about loving some of those fostering autonomy suggestions, like leading the way and testing their developing skills and their need for freedom.
Awesome.
And thank you to Jeanette for that comment. I couldn't agree more. One of my favorite slides.
Oh, thank you. All right, so our words matter. And this kind of builds off of that last point of our words really matter. So we help create the inner monologue for the next generation. So for younger children, tone is extremely important. You can say sometimes really funny things in a very bubbly way, and they take that as bubbly and happy. But for this age, for tweens, the tone and word choice both matter. And like I mentioned before, if they feel devastated and you say sad and they correct you, using their language is going to be really important. The problem is the problem. The child is not the problem. So just really keeping that in mind, that whatever is the problem in that moment, not being able to get out of the door like you want, that is the problem. Your child is not the problem. also giving them the language of like, do you want me to hold space for you right now? Like, do you want me to just listen? Or do you want me to help you solve this problem? Getting clear on what they are looking for. And sometimes when you first start saying that, they're going to say, I don't know. And you can then, go along and say like, oh, okay. So do you want me to sit here and just listen? Or do you want me to help problem solve? And they say, I don't know. And you can say, well, okay. Then why don't you tell me more about it, and we can figure it out together, things like that. Areas of struggle are a lack of skill and not defiance. And I know that at this age, it feels like defiance. And our children are so good at finding our buttons and pushing them again and again and again. And like I said at the beginning, every time they push a button, I really try to keep in mind that they are making a bid for connection in those moments. Every time they push one of your buttons or say something in a sassy way, they are saying, do you still love me? Do you still love me now? Even when I'm being annoying, do you still love me? So that's why that connection before correction is super important. If they are saying really mean things to you or other members of your household or out in public, saying like, hey, I know you are kind. You are a kind person. Can you tell me more about why you did that or said that? I really do want to understand. And that goes along with that observation plus what's up with that a little bit, but this is a little bit more nuanced. And then teaching them how to talk to themselves like a friend, instead like how they would to a friend. So we can be so mean to ourselves, and tweens can be really mean to themselves because they're hearing a lot from friends about like our shoulders are too wide or all these things that start coming up in these tween years, observations and trying to sort through who different people are and what group they're in and things like that. So teaching them that inner monologue of self-compassion is really, really important. And they actually pay more attention to how adults talk to each other than they do how an adult talks to a child. So keep that in mind for how you are talking to the adults around you. And I will say quickly that sometimes when children are being extra sassy, I ask the parents about if they have any robot speakers in their house. Our Siris and Alexas. I don't want to say it too loud because I don't want to set them off, but those robot speakers in the house, because a lot of times we're really rude to our robot speakers, and sometimes for tweens, and especially younger kids, but it can happen for tweens too. They hear that language and they don't make the connection of like, oh, this is a robot and we can talk to robots like this, but we need to talk to other humans in a different way. So I just encourage you to be kind to your robot speakers too, because also if the robots ever rise up, then they'll maybe take mercy on us for being kind. If you wouldn't say it to a friend, don't say it to yourself. So children and adolescents pick up on how their caregivers speak to themselves and they internalize it. So really make sure that you're being kind to yourself too. If you are constantly criticizing yourself, then what you are unintentionally teaching is that your child should also be criticizing themselves all the time. So keep in mind that you got to talk to yourself in a kind way too. Have some compassion for yourself. This is a fun tool. Make a different choice. And this is especially good for this age. So many times children already have an idea about how to solve the problem. And sometimes an adult needs only to suggest, make a different choice. And there's a really fun game that I don't have a lot of time to go into how to play, but there's a game that you can play with this that's kind of based on an acting game. So if you want to know about it, email in and I'm happy to send you more details about that game. But why does this help? So this returns the power to the child, helps foster autonomy, and encourages critical thinking skills that empower the child to feel positively about their behavior. So we want to be fostering critical thinking skills for this age. It is super important as they have more freedom that they are building those critical thinking skills. So make a different choice gives them an opportunity to do that. It also places the adult in the position of a guide instead of a warden. So you're helping guide them to how they could do things differently instead of saying like, you have to do it my way or the highway. And it also creates moments of freedom during redirection, which are mood boosters to the child and sanity savers for the adult. So yeah, it allows for a little bit more freedom. I also provided some alternative phrases. So if you want to be more specific, make a safer choice, make a quieter choice, make a calmer choice, make a kinder choice, make another choice, or make a new choice. I will also say that I intentionally did not include make a better choice. So in these moments, we really want to avoid judgment and stay in the realm of curiosity and like critical thinking, offering that autonomy. So saying make a better choice also is a bit meaningless because sometimes they literally don't know what the better choice is. So on those chances, on the off chance that that is what's going on, you can be more specific of the behavior that you are wanting to see. And so speaking of choices, remember that you have the ability to respond instead of react. So if you are finding that when your kiddos are pushing your buttons and things like that, your tweens are really, really, really rubbing you the wrong way, sometimes we lose our prefrontal cortex a bit too. Even though it's fully developed, it can still go offline and we can get in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response area. Or reaction area. So we want to take a moment and calm ourselves. And sometimes you can include them in that calming. A lot of times it would be great to include them in that calming of saying like, whew, I am feeling really frustrated right now. I need to take 5 deep breaths, or I need to point out 5 things that are yellow in the room, or however, take a cold drink of water, or I need to go into the other room for a minute and I will be back. And I would love to talk more about this once I feel calm. So we can respond instead of react. The 5-step conflict resolution. This is based off the work of Dan Gartrell. So if there is a conflict, let's say between siblings or between your child and a friend, if they're playing at your house, things like that. The first step, everybody calms down, and that includes you. So we just went over some of the ways that you can calm down. Once everyone is calm, then you listen to each child in turn. So you want to say something like, Bobby, I want to hear what you have to say. Right now, we're going to listen to Jonathan, and then it will be your turn. So after you hear from the first child, repeat what you heard as a judgment-free summary. So if Jonathan said, Bobby stole all of my Pokemon cards, like he stole them all, and you can repeat back, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that you were playing with the Pokemon cards and then Bobby took them and put them in front of him, things like that. Take all the judgment out of it. And then you repeat that step with the other child. So Bobby says, they're my Pokemon cards. So Bobby, what I'm hearing you say is that these Pokemon cards, you believe that they actually belong to you. Or that they belong to you. Take out that actually, that was a judgment. And then restate the entire situation without blame. So we have 2 boys here that want to play with Pokemon cards. and we're struggling to know how to do that exactly. How can we solve this? And then you stop talking, and then you count to 20 in your mind. And then as they start to suggest things, as one child starts to suggest things, you can check in with the other kid. Does that sound fair to you? So, you know, Jonathan might say, I get all the Pokemon cards and Bobby can go play on the swings, whatever. And you can check in. Bobby, does that sound fair to you? And if both children agree to a solution and it is safe, even if that is not the solution that you would have chosen, help facilitate it. Go with it, because this is, again, fostering that autonomy, helping them with their critical thinking, and it provides them with skill building. So, and then you follow up as needed. So the more you lead tweens and even younger children through this, the easier it becomes and the less you have to be involved. I have taught this to a 2-year-old. So, and they, you know, it's a little bit different with that age, but with tweens, they can certainly work through this. Tween friendships. I included John Mulaney saying, now we don't have time to unpack all of that, but just a few things on tween friendships, because they are so hard. A hot take that I truly believe is that kids do not need to like everyone equally. They do not need to equally love everyone in their class. We have to teach them the questions that they need to ask themselves. So that is more of that guidance talk, instead of, you know, really telling them how to solve a problem. So that's an excellent opportunity to use that. Do you want me to help you solve this problem, or do you want me to just listen? Because sometimes they just need to vent. And the 70-30 split of talking about it. So the child should be talking about 70% of the time when they're talking to you about struggles with friendships, and struggles in general. And you should be talking about 30% of the time. Remove should from these discussions. And my goodness, that is hard to do. I do it all the time. I literally just told you that you should be allowing them to talk for 70% of the time, but we don't know what they should have done. We aren't inside their friendships. We can know what we think would work, but we don't know what they should have done, and should automatically attaches that judgment onto it. A really lovely way to talk with a tween about friendship struggles is to join them in the memory. So really get specific about the imagery. So, oh, okay, so Bobby said he didn't want to play with you. Where did this happen? Oh, on the playground. Was it on the bench up the hill or down the hill? Oh, the one by the swings. Yeah, so you were sitting there and you said, let's go play tag. And then Bobby said he didn't want to play with you. Wow. And then, you know, and then what happened? Like really get into the imagery of it, because then when they think back on that memory, they have you somewhat there with them. You're helping provide support in that really painful memory. And then screen time. I did not leave enough time for this topic, but so how much, when, doing what, with who, so many questions. So the screen is not the enemy. I know a lot of times it feels like it is, but asking yourself, what is this screen replacing, can be a really, really helpful way to think about it. Kids need boundaries, and they need boundaries around screens extra, because they are so enticing to us, right? So even if they won't admit it, they do need boundaries. So a phrasing that you can use is, here's what I'm noticing. You're playing on your phone when you're supposed to be doing homework. So to help, I am going to take and keep your phone with me for right now. If you come up with a different solution, I am willing to talk about that. But until then, your phone's going to be with me. When you're all done with your homework, come check in and you can have your phone back. Things like that. Listen for the unmet need when talking about screens. So a lot of times kids who struggle socially will find what they feel like is social interaction through screens, and sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. So really be listening for like, oh, is it lack of social? Is it lack of time where your brain is kind of just like running, like where you're not like actively thinking? Is it that you're feeling overwhelmed? Lots of things can be going on. Listen for that unmet need, because to just blame the screen and then take it away without building skills to help meet that unmet need is not going to be as helpful as we might hope it is. And then we are at questions. All right, I feel pretty good about it. I ended close to on time.
You did great. It's 8:31. Holy smokes. Yeah, that was really good timing. Thank you, Martha. And I do invite your questions. You can type them into the Q&A. We have one already. I'm going to allow a moment for any more questions that you may have to be typed into that Q&A tab. But just a really wonderful summary of the neurodevelopmental kind of basis for some of these tween behaviors that we see, followed by some really just practical strategies and skills and dispositions we as parents can have as we're parenting our tweens. I think I've read about 30 parenting books. I've parented a tween. I'm parenting a tween, and I'm going to parent another one in a couple of years. And I found some of these just really refreshing and helpful and just centering for me as a parent. So thank you, Martha, for this past hour. I'll talk. I'm just going to kind of summarize this first question that we have, Martha, for you. And it's a parent, a mom who's noticing that her son opens up more with her husband, and she can't help but feel a little bit left out because she feels like she's losing that connection that she once had with him, and that she's really excited about this connection he has with his dad. But any suggestions that you have for moms like me who want to be included in everything is the way that the question reads.
Yeah, that is so hard. It is hard when you feel like the less favored parent. I would encourage you to carve out time that you have no distractions and can really have some time with your child that is just you and the child, and doing something that they really enjoy. So you can sit down with them and say, like, I'm really wanting to spend some time with you. I'm curious about what you would like to do. Like, we can go ice skating or go to the library or go to the playground or whatever they might want to do. Go to like a jump zone, go out to dinner. Lots of options, but whatever they want to do, having that time, and then really checking in with your interactions, and making sure that you are offering that connection before correction. Because I know a lot of times in the hustle and bustle of life, we just need them to put on the shoes, or we just need them to like pack their lunch, or we just need them to do et cetera, et cetera. And so really searching for those moments when you are interacting with the child to make sure that that connection piece is as present as it can be really helpful. I also think that sometimes making sure that you are potentially listening instead of trying to problem solve. Sometimes tweens can like go to the parent who will just hold space, or it might be the opposite. They might need a little bit more guidance. So really checking in with them about like, how can I help you in this moment? Like, what are you looking for right now? And offering some of that. But that is hard. And it flows, right? So it might not be this way forever. And I also think that that can be encouraging to keep in mind, that the favor and less favored parent, that can be kind of flowy between the two.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, the how those relationships flow back and forth, given different time periods and different needs that they might be experiencing. I think that's a really good point. And I think as the child ages from right infancy to toddlerhood, intermediate to this tween, we just checking in with ourselves and how our identity as a involved parent is changing as that child's needs change too, can be really helpful. Thank you for that. Another question that came in is just any tips for working with tweens with trauma?
Yeah.
Anything that comes to mind? Yeah, and just how we might parent differently, or how we might think about, given those some of the neurodevelopmental things that you talked about, and some of the specific needs that might come up with a tween who's experienced trauma.
Yeah. So if your tween who has experienced trauma is not in therapy, I would recommend therapy. And if they did therapy closer to the trauma, like in the aftermath of the trauma, and then they stopped going to therapy because they were doing well. We know that sometimes, or we know that for trauma, each new developmental milestone can really like bring a lot of that back up, and they have to recontextualize how that trauma impacted them and continues to impact them in a new way with the new brain, the development in their brain. So sometimes, even if like in early childhood, they had coping skills and they were doing a lot better, and you're like, I really thought we were past a lot of this. Sometimes as they get older, it can come up again in new ways. So that is a really wonderful question and a very big question. And I don't have a full answer for you, but I do think that just knowing that it can come up for them, like it can come up again in that new developmental age, can be helpful, especially with all the hormones and changes that are going on in their brain. But Dr. Frampton, I would also love if you have insight on that too.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think if it does come back up as they're reaching a new cognitive developmental point in their life, that doesn't mean that it's problematic. It just means that they may be re-experiencing it. It's going to be painful, and that's often okay. We don't want them to sit in the pain too long, but having your support or the support of a therapist to move through it is going to give them this new understanding, and perhaps even more healing, and hopefully more healing and more space from the trauma they experience, so that they can then experience what we know is that kind of post-traumatic growth, where they're learning and appreciating a relationship more, or security and safety more, or their spirituality, or whatever aspect of life where they experience some of that post-traumatic growth, which is really important, especially for all of us coming out of the couple of years that we've been going through.
Yep.
So that's all the questions that I see. Thank you so much for your participation in those questions. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll look forward to another presentation sometime here in the future with Lakeview Pediatrics. I did provide their website and ours in the chat, so feel free to access that. I also provided, Martha, you offered up your email, so I just shot it out there. I didn't even ask your permission. I just did it. I hope that was okay.
That's great.
So you have that. Go ahead and take a peek at that. Again, thank you all for joining us.